Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? How's your mute button doing? Not great, like mine? Okay, well then, we're in the same boat. Good morning. It is May 18th, 2022. Time for another show. It is post-Super Tuesday. I don't know whether you call it Super Wednesday, or Eastern Orthodox Super Tuesday, or Pretty Super Terrific Wednesday, because, of course, it follows up some very, very good, very fun and encouraging results in the primaries held yesterday. And I guess, well, primarily, because they're about primaries, and that's the primary reason I'm using that term for it, primarily the loss in North Carolina's 11th district for Madison Cawthorn. That's right, the results are in, and Madison Cawthorn is out. Although sometimes I worry that might make him a more dangerous person in the next couple of months. He has lost all his power. He's a lame duck in that sense. And I'm sure that the jerk-ass Republican that they nominated in his place is, okay, only a little bit better, but might actually pay attention to the district. It might be a somewhat of a less of an embarrassment for North Carolina's 11th district, but we don't know yet. This person is still a Republican, and at a time when it's pretty revealing and embarrassing to be a Republican. So there is that. But it's good. I'm glad he didn't last. It won't happen necessarily to all of his dumbass colleagues who are brand new members this time around. And it's a fairly common thing, too. Misfit, outspoken, first-term members are among the most endangered. I mean, it doesn't really help you all that much to keep your head down necessarily either. At least he was trying to build a name for himself, but he's just quite a dumb person. And so the name he built was also very dumb. So, whatever. We're glad to see that happening. Some of the results still indeterminate at this point. Still waiting to find out whether the great and powerful Oz has won nomination in the Senate race in Pennsylvania. So we'll see how that one goes. The jerk-ass insurrectionist won for in the governor's race there in Pennsylvania. So now the task becomes making sure that person doesn't get anywhere near the governor's office in the end. But that's it. That's all there is. Sorry, everybody. No, I mean, it's time to move on to Bill's morning tweet so we can find out what the hell we're doing around here. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. That part we've got taken care of. Kagro X regrets to inform you that Madison Cawthorn will be unable to join us today as he has some unexpected packing to do. That's right. Like William Santiago, he will be packing to leave for the rest of his life, I hope. I don't know. He may come back to Washington, D.C. as a lobbyist. Maybe he really likes it around here. Not sure. Fewer trees to punch. And I don't know whether he thinks that's a good thing or not. Like, do you want more trees to punch, or were you working to defeat trees as an enemy and you prefer hanging around here in a more urban environment? Let's see. Let's see. Our friend Truro Renfro says, is the Twitter handle Flash in the Pan available? We should check on that. Asking for an outgoing U.S. representative for North Carolina's 11th congressional district. Yes. I don't know whether it's really available or not, but let's say yes, it is, and we'll give it to him, and we'll force anyone else who might be on it off of there. Let's see. What other things? Congratulations to, who was it that said last night, congratulations to Madison Cawthorn on his new career on Cameo. I guess that's something. If anybody recognized his voice, he could perhaps make a couple bucks on Cameo. And, all right. Plenty of suggestions for what he might do next, and I'm sure he really doesn't want to listen to any of it. I imagine he's stunned, although it's possible that his staff prepared him for it. Peter Segal, that was the congratulations to Madison Cawthorn on his new career in Cameo, correctly credited there. And, okay. we'll be rounding up results from all over the place, and Greg actually reads the newspapers and finds out which one of these wins are unexpected and which are important and which ones require further discussion. So we'll leave that to him, and well, we'll do his bidding there. I'll happily discuss these things. I had too much going on in order to sit down and comb over the papers. I could barely manage to open up Twitter and see what everybody was talking about, and then some of that changed during the night. I guess as bedtime drew near, and I'm reminded this morning that bedtime is considered tyranny among some certain sector of our population. Just happened to see a gun story in which an 8th grader shot his father in an argument over bedtime. Tyranny takes many forms. At any rate, when mine came around, there was some indication that Oz, the great and powerful, was behind the curtain and behind in the vote count as well, and then came from behind overnight to pull ahead. And I guess that's where it stands now, and many astute observers pointing out that according to, he is of course Trump endorsed, and the Trump election rules say that if everybody goes to bed and the other guy is ahead, and then they wake up and the different guy is ahead, that's voter fraud. So Mehmet Oz, guilty as charged. I say we lock him up for voter fraud immediately, and thereby become the greatest Trumpers in the world, which probably wouldn't even upset Donald Trump all that much. I imagine he would have been fine with it. He says, not everybody can make this successful transition from great television host to great politician. We thought Mehmet Oz had what it takes, but obviously he doesn't. Oh, he does? Okay, well then, easily enough reversed. Won't bother Donald Trump any. It doesn't bother Greg either, so let's talk to Greg, because I'd rather do that than talk to Donald Trump. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning.
That's not a very high bar, is it?
It isn't just the overnight flipping of votes.
It isn't?
No, because it isn't decided yet. And the thing that's going to decide it are those mail-in ballots.
That is fraud.
And the thing is, of course, the mail-in ballots so far have favored Dave McCormick, who's about 2,000 votes behind Oz, and there's like 34,000 votes outstanding.
Wow. Well,
so we don't know who won. You're right. Kathy Barnett, the surging MAGA lady who lost, came in at 24.8% of the vote. McCormick has 31.1, Oz has 31.3, but those vote by mail, the VBM votes, may flip it. Ooh. And if, in fact, that happens, I'm thinking Doug Mastriano, who is the Trumpy guy who won the nomination for governor, ought to declare martial law and just take over the whole election apparatus.
Right.
Because it's obviously fraud.
Yes.
I mean, he's betraying MAGA if he doesn't do that.
That's true. Also, he should declare his own nomination invalid, but so far they've never done that. But it'll always be interesting to see them try to. Well, no, because they never try to explain it. We say they have to, and then they just don't do it. Explain how part 1 of the ballot was valid and part 2 of the ballot was not. But the answer is
the Republican senator who won was fine, but the Democratic president who won isn't fine. You got to figure that part out. They're basically full of it, and the media's not having it this morning, at least, which is kind of good. But you mentioned, besides Pennsylvania, we have North Carolina, and you're right. That Chuck Edwards came in with 33.4% of the vote, and Madison Cawthorn 31.9%. So, my view of it is Madison Cawthorn is going to be taking more time to follow his heart, which is to say collecting Nazi memorabilia.
Yeah. He's going to spend more time with Hitler's family.
Yeah, I'm over it.
Okay.
Right. In Oregon, interesting stuff here. Not so much in the Senate race where won a close race, 90% to 6.
Shoo.
That was a real close one.
The skin of his teeth.
But in the House, the one people were watching is Kurt Schrader, who's the turncoat Democrat who doesn't like Democrats and is anti-choice. And right now, with only 53% of the vote counted, because this takes a while, Jamie McLeod Skinner has 61.3% and Kurt Schrader has 38.7%.
Oh, well.
So that doesn't bode well for him. There are some areas that are stronger for him that are going to come in, but nonetheless, Schrader may lose. And, fine. This may be one of the Roe effects.
Maybe. Yeah, he was never a stellar performer.
He was a cross-platform guy.
Yeah.
He appealed to everybody,
sure.
except not this year because the Democrats have had it with him.
Yeah, he was a well-known figure and very popular among people who take off for vacation instead of coming to get sworn into the House and then have to get sworn in late separately because they decided to take a honeymoon on swearing-in day, which is kind of like on the calendar permanently, and you can plan around it if you care about your job, and I guess he didn't.
Well, before I forget, also I should mention the lieutenant governor candidate lost, the guy who was at the January 6th insurrection. So 2 out of 3 insurrectionists lost in Pennsylvania, if you want to look at it that way. The one that won is the governor, the most important race. Yeah. But that's the one that Republicans are very upset about because they figure he'll lose. Now, you can't assume that, but Josh Shapiro is already running against him in terms of who he is.
Not Ben Shapiro.
What he's doing.
All right.
He's the Shapiro fundraising pitch. Doug Mastriano will be my opponent. He's the most extreme gubernatorial candidate in the country. He would ban abortion, end vote by mail, and rip away our freedoms. So hopefully they do better running against him than McAuliffe did running against Youngkin,
right? Well,
who probably loves this guy.
Mastriano hates us for our freedoms. You could try
and our vote by mail.
Right. Well, that's one of them. Our favorite one.
Right. In Idaho.
Oh.
Remember the Idaho, very conservative Governor Brad Little was running against his completely insane lieutenant governor, Janice McGeachin. This is the lady who every time Little left the state would say, I'm the queen, and I rescind everything that he did until he got back, and then he had to re-rescind, unrescind, or whatever the word is technically.
Sinned.
Right. But they're both cinders,
Right.
We're all cinders, really, deep in our hearts. But these guys would just rescind each other. And so he won 53-31 running against her specifically.
Okay. So she's specifically without a job, I guess. What's the deal with how you get to be lieutenant governor there? Does she have to run?
I don't know. The function of lieutenant governor in Idaho.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I guess,
few do.
The governor is the governor and lieutenant governor is the militia leader. I don't know how it works.
Maybe. I don't know. I'd ask Joan, but she doesn't care anymore. But she'd be able to tell us.
Yeah, she
would.
It's
not her problem.
Yeah,
okay.
She knows all about Iowa. I mean Idaho.
Yeah. Illinois, whichever.
Illinois, whatever.
Indiana.
Yeah. She could tell us just how crazy those people are.
Sure. We spent a long time on it yesterday as it happens. But there's no shortage there. That's a great natural resource.
So the thing is, if you're going to look at school board races, I don't have this no central school board race blog. I'm waiting for Taniel to collect some of that stuff. But I do know, at least in New York, a lot of the Trumpy people lost.
That's good.
They lost in Carmel, New York, which is not far from me. They lost in Long Island. And so, the more sane people did okay, even in the redder areas. So that's a little encouraging.
Yeah.
But the issue now is, how does the media cover all of this? This is a nice piece from Dan Pfeiffer. What the media keeps getting wrong about Trump, each and every twist and turn in the Republican Party, primaries, policy positions, utterances are viewed through the prism of Donald Trump. They're treated as tests of the strength of his hold over the Republican Party. And I would look no further than the coverage of the Pennsylvania Senate race.
Yes,
okay. But the real issue isn't that, he goes on to say. It's the governor race. In other words, it doesn't matter whether or not he endorsed Oz or not, squeaks it out or doesn't squeak it out. Who cares? The point is Mastriano won, and he's a Trumpist, and he's a MAGA-ist, and it doesn't matter if it's Trump. Trump's just the sideshow now. The problem is that the Republican Party is completely metastasized into a Trump-like, or as they say in the gaming world, is it rogue light or is it rogue like?
Oh.
When you're playing a game, you play one run and then you win and then you have to start all over again and do it again. That's rogue. And is this Trump like or is it Trump light? It doesn't matter whether you're talking about Ron DeSantis, Greg Abbott, or Doug Mastriano. They're all insurrectionists, all of them.
Yeah. Well, I think there's nothing
so
light
you get rid
about
of Trump,
any of them.
you're still left with these governors who are insurrectionists. That's a problem.
Yes.
So that's a point that Pfeiffer makes, which I think is true. Vaughn Hilliard handles it a little differently, and I'm just trying to give you an example of how the media is not just rolling over for this.
Well, good.
Doug Mastriano, projected by NBC News to be Pennsylvania's GOP nominee for governor, pushed for a resolution to toss out Biden's 2020 win in Pennsylvania. He would be tasked with certifying the 2024 election results, and I would add, and he was at the January 6th insurrection. But this goes beyond Mastriano. Arizona's leading GOP gubernatorial candidate, Kari Lake, another nutter, when asked whether she would have certified Arizona's 2020 results, has remained clear, hell no. Michigan's leading GOP candidate for governor, NBC, would you tell Trump that you would have certified Biden as winner of the 2020 election in Michigan? James Craig, I don't know if I would have told him. I would have certified. Wisconsin's leading GOP gubernatorial contender, Rebecca Kleefisch, will not say she would have certified Biden's Wisconsin election win in 2020. Mastriano and his running mate are QAnon nut jobs, one of the commenters adds.
Okay.
And, that's part of the issue. Now, it turns out that the guy who was at the insurrection didn't win for lieutenant governor. But, again, it's beyond just one, Trump. It's beyond one specific person. Here's the headline in the Daily Beast. Trump-backed big lie pushing Doug Mastriano wins GOP gubernatorial primary in Pennsylvania. That's pretty good.
Yes.
In terms of just like directly handling it in the headlines. And this is New York Times. Election deniers thrive even as Trumpism drifts. 5 primary takeaways. Again, tackling the fact that it's the Republican Party that's the issue, not Trump at this point. For all of those people who just couldn't stomach Hillary and voted for Donald Trump, this is on you. This is what you gave us.
Yep, and we blame you for it. We will hold you.
Because the only way to keep this in check is for them to lose. When they win, then they feel empowered, and that's how Mastriano winds up being the GOP gubernatorial selection, which, by the way, is bad.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how well he does. I don't know. He's the name we've been hearing all this time because he's so controversial. That always worries me because we don't.
Well, he was leading all along. This is one of the reasons why we keep hearing about it.
But they don't talk about the Democratic side of the race. Now, I guess all the journalists will have permission to tell everybody who's actually running from.
Yeah, his name is Josh Shapiro.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We're done. Also, the other guy's a jerk, and don't say his name anymore. I don't know.
Brendan Nyhan, leading Republican contenders for governor in numerous battleground states, have said they would sought to overturn the 2020 election results. The integrity of the 2024 election is under very serious threat right now.
Yes.
So, it's perhaps better to talk about how you feel about democracy and the overturning the 2020 election. And next month, the January 6th committee hearings are there, making it very salient.
Yes.
And you get to pound these people with it, something that didn't happen in Virginia. Glenn Youngkin was never pinned in terms of what would happen in regard to his opinion about the election and why it matters. Instead, it was about other things. And that didn't work out for the Democrats. So they better be a little bit more clear about why tying a Republican to Trumpism, not just Trump, is important. And so hopefully these things will highlight that.
Yeah, well, we
as they say, what was it, Beyond the Fringe? I've spent a lot of time learning from my mistakes so I can make them exactly the same way the next time. You got to learn from mistakes like Virginia and not make those mistakes.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of advice going around at the time, and it'll be interesting to see whether they pull this videotape to teach people what the lessons were. You need to be for something. You can't just talk about Trump or try to tie the guy to Trump. Oh, really? Okay, well, we'll kitchen table this one. Oh, we lost. What do you know? That was pretty weird.
That didn't work, and that's why Fetterman won. People aren't interested in kitchen tabling it. Although I have to say there are reasons to not ignore that part either. This is a Morning Consult political poll from this morning. Who do you trust more to handle the economy? Republicans in Congress, 43. Democrats in Congress, 39. Who do you trust more to handle inflation? Republicans in Congress, 44. Democrats in Congress 37. If you want to make headway in terms of the election, you're going to have to tackle those numbers. You just are. So you can't ignore the kitchen table, but you can't make that the only focus any more than you could make what happened in 2020 the only focus. Well, 2020 is so hindsighted. People want to look ahead. Trump's not going away. That's where he helps you. But you have to tackle Trumpism, not just Trump.
Yeah.
Because Glenn Youngkin can say, I'm not Donald Trump, and that, in fact, is true. And PolitiFact would say, well, that's true. He isn't Donald Trump. That's 100% true. And anybody who says he's Donald Trump is like 4 Pinocchios. That's not what we're saying. We're saying he's tied to Trumpism because he's in the Republican Party. And the Republican Party is tied to Trumpism. And that's what we're saying. And if you don't make that clear, then the PolitiFacts of the world are going to, Pinocchio you to death.
Fine, well, you only get 3 Pinocchios, because he is a member of the Republican Party. But something guilt by association. Well, we'll see what they come up with.
Well, it's more than guilt by association when the voters in the party are voting for insurrectionists like Doug Mastriano.
Yeah. I mean, there's hardly anybody out there who could tell you, oh, yeah, well, Doug Mastriano has this plan for Pennsylvania. I mean, other than he'll certify Donald Trump or any Republican, even if they lose. That's what they know about it. Well, what's the Mastriano economic plan? Anyone? I mean, I guess I'd ask Pennsylvanians, just to be fair. But I didn't hear any Pennsylvanians just that second say that they knew what he was promising. So I'm right.
Well, it's important to make sure that people understand that the Republican Party are extremists. And no, it's not exaggeration to say that. And you don't have to call them racist. Just call them extremists because they are.
Yes.
Well, here's a poll out. Just came out from North Carolina, where Ted Budd won the nomination on the Republican side. Sherry Beasley will be the Democrat for Senate. And in the first poll numbers released after the primary, the race is a dead heat. Budd 44, Beasley 43. North Carolinians don't know that much about either one. So we'll see what happens with that. But, the Senate is not an automatic loss. The House is going to be trouble, but the Senate is not an automatic loss. And whether it's Pennsylvania and Fetterman against Oz Cormack or whoever it is who winds up emerging from that, that is a potential pickup. It'll be tough. It'll probably be a toss-up, maybe slightly leaning Republican. But it's possible. And it's possible to pick up North Carolina. It's possible to lose them both. But you got to run a good race, and you have to make sure that after the January 6th hearings, people who are tied to January 6th and the party that's tied to January 6th is put at a disadvantage.
Okay. I intend to say lousy things about the January 6th people.
Well, you should.
Yeah, I think I'm justified.
And there's going to be a lot more of it. There were reports circulating that the Department of Justice has asked the January 6th committee for some of their work, and the January 6th committee said, you can't just have our work, you got to do your own work.
They did?
And people got mad about that, and folks who work in Washington say, just, look, this is the way it always works. This is a negotiation. It's not okay, you can have everything you ask for.
All right. I mean, I don't know what they asked for, so it's hard to say, but I understand the type of material they asked for, and you kind of hope that would eventually maybe make their way over to DOJ. I don't know whether they intend to do hearings and then make a splashy noise about it and then hand over the evidence.
Yeah, that would make a whole lot more sense.
You
can have it, but after we're done with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we try, trumpet it everywhere, make people mad,
and then we made it public, and so of course you can have it because it's public information.
Right, that's true. Yeah, you can have it. Wait for me to read it. Okay. Well, we'll see. I'll look into it. We have some media reports on the subject. They'll explain that might clarify why they prefer to wait. I hope it makes good sense.
Yeah, hope so. Anyway, so that's basically the news from yesterday. After the break, we're still going to talk about Buffalo. Guess what? It's still in the news. Well, yeah. I sent you some screenshots of the New York Times and Washington Post, for example. New York Times today. For New York's governor, shooting in Buffalo is a hometown tragedy. Suspect in the Buffalo massacre invited people into a private chat room about 30 minutes before to review his plan. That's new.
Oh.
And kind of interesting. And, of course, nobody in the chat room thought to call the authorities because why would they? This is on Discord. Wow. So if you're wondering about where he was radicalized, the answer is Discord and 4chan.
Okay. Well,
I don't go in either one, but I'm more familiar with Discord because that's where you get gaming tips.
Yes, right. And, it's been an odd overlap of gaming and alt-right weirdness for a while in all of the various fora that gamers use. And it's been a conscious plan, and we read, years ago about Steve Bannon's interest in that and using it to, groom alt-right shock troops. He's the biggest groomer in America. And no one, except everybody, knows it. It's odd that works that way, but you know how they are about making accusations and actually being guilty of that thing.
Right. Other stories in the New York Times. Annual number of firearms manufactured in the U.S. has nearly tripled since 2000. Wow. And then an interview with Chris Murphy about what it all means. So that's how the New York Times is handling it. The Washington Post has one from Sean Boberg. Sean Boberg was the New Jersey guy who used to follow Chris Christie and was intimately involved with moving the cones on the George Washington Bridge. He was the reporter who asked that question.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I like him. I've always followed him. And he has a piece. I lied to them for months. Shooting suspect kept plans from family. And then an interview with black residents on Buffalo's east side about what that looks like. It's not the devil, it's America, because they're just they point to the racism they face every day. So again, racism, racial disparities, not the same thing. One shouldn't confuse one for the other, just as one shouldn't confuse demographics with great replacement theory.
That's true. And weather isn't climate. I just thought I'd throw that in there just at the end. Okay.
Anyway, still in the news. We'll talk about it a little more after the break.
All right. We got time. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Time to cover more news. That's kind of what we do here. So let's see what's up. What's up next, Greg? Let's see.
This story is just so weird.
What you're dropping here, yeah.
You have to cover it. This is before massacre began. Suspect invited others to review his plan.
Oh,
who is reviewer number 2? About 30 minutes before he launched what investigators said was a long-planned massacre at a Buffalo supermarket, Peyton S. Gendron invited a small group of people to join a chat room online. Until that moment, the posts in the room on the chat application Discord had been visible only to himself, whose name I don't know how to pronounce, but that's, standard for me on this show, who had for months uploaded numerous pictures of himself, often posing with his gear and the weapon that officials say he used to carry out the shooting, even sharing hand-drawn maps of the Tops grocery store he openly said he planned to attack. Now, that wasn't visible to anybody except himself, so you can't fault him for not reporting that. But none of the people he invited to review his writings appeared to have alerted law enforcement, and the massacre played out much as he envisioned. A compendium of his posts from Discord circulated online over the weekend, and details of those records were publicized on Monday, but it's not previously known that other users had joined the Discord chat room known as a server about 30 minutes before he carried out the attack. In a statement, a spokeswoman for Discord said, hate has no place on Discord. But apparently chat rooms where you plan mass shootings does.
Yeah, that was a place on Discord, wasn't it? Yeah, well,
What we know at this time is that a private invite-only server was created by the suspect to serve as a personal diary chat log. The statement said approximately 30 minutes prior to the attack, a small group of people were invited to and join the server. Before that, our records indicate no other people saw the diary chat log in the private server. So my question is, well, what are you doing about those people who were in the chat room?
Can we have their names?
Do they now have their own chat room? You let them stay? You rewarded them? What is this? What's going on here? We don't know. Doesn't say.
Yeah.
Why would that be worthy of discussion?
I don't know.
From their point of view.
No idea what's going on.
Look, up until the time he shot anybody, he hadn't shot anybody.
Right. Also true. Aha.
It is true. What's that got to do with anything?
Yeah, I don't know. These places. Why does it keep happening? We can't figure it out. But yeah, apparently people keep exploiting these services for these same purposes, and we decided that that's not criminal. But we can change that. We just have to discuss it and vote on it. And as you know, that could be filibustered forever and yada yada. But okay, the Discord and Twitch for the live streaming, the names keep coming up over and over again in connection with these kinds of crimes. And as you pointed out, none of the people who came into the chat room bothered to do anything like call law enforcement and say, maybe this mass shooting shouldn't happen. So we can assume that they were all fans of the idea. And I think then that the local police probably ought to want to know who they are and check in on them and see what they might be planning.
What did they do? Did they offer encouragement and pointers?
Who
what
knows?
were they there for?
Or if they just sat there and did nothing, it's something we'd want to talk about. Although I will point out that it might not have been worth much to call 911 in Buffalo, apparently. Big story coming out of the shooting. In the aftermath of the shooting, one of the store assistant managers called 911 during the attack and was trying to inform police that there was an active shooter in the building, and at some point she had to whisper into the phone because the attacker was nearby, or at least she thought he was, and she didn't want to tip him off to her presence, and that frustrated the 911 dispatcher to no end, who yelled at her for whispering and hung up on her. She had to instead turn and call her boyfriend and ask him to call 911 where he could speak in a normal voice and relay the fact that, you may want to get some police down here.
Amazing.
Yep.
So the Times story goes on to say the Discord chat logs complement the nearly 200-page racist screed that he released before the attack. That widely shared document was clearly meant for an audience less versed in the slang and references that he had picked up on 4chan, Reddit, and other websites.
Oh, really? They didn't know his thing? His slang?
In Discord, he revealed far more personal details, often emphasizing his thoughts with racist and anti-Semitic memes and occasionally expressing self-doubt and the wish to commit suicide, which sometimes is suicide by cop. But it's also clear that he was fully aware that the logs he uploaded would be pored over by law enforcement and others.
Mm-hmm. So
now, a person who actively encourages an active mass shooting could potentially be criminally liable, though the bar for any charges would be high, according to a law enforcement official. And throughout the compendium, he frequently references working on the Discord transcript, suggesting the process of posting it online wasn't as simple as downloading it. In March, the month during which he had originally planned to carry out the attack, he mentioned configuring the settings on Discord to ensure that others could look at one channel without changing anything. But in another channel, the general chat, he said other users could type, send images, post emoji reactions, or being unable to delete each other's posts. And on a third channel he created, he planned to embed the live stream of himself carrying out the shooting using Twitch.
Mm-hmm.
So, there you have it.
Boy, did he plan and plan and plan. He didn't plan to get himself any help, any mental health interventions or anything like that. And again, I will note for the record, a lot of this, his planning included his glorious self-sacrifice at the end and his suicide. And at the end, golly, he just couldn't do it. I thought that he could carry out the murders just fine, but when it came to himself, well, he just felt differently.
Right. Here's another little tidbit from this Times piece. This nugget tells you about the relationship between Discord and gaming. Discord began life as the chatting feature of a little-known video game, but the creator of the game abandoned the game and focused entirely on the chat software.
That
in 2015.
Apparently worked out well. What game was it, I wonder? Yeah, I wouldn't recognize the game anyway, even if you told me the name. But
I don't know. Maybe it was called Discord.
Yeah,
like many social media platforms, Discord has struggled to balance privacy and free speech ideals with combating hate speech and content moderation. Elon Musk should buy it.
Yeah. You could probably get it a lot cheaper than Twitter.
Well, maybe, I don't know. Do they have stock he can drive down? Otherwise, he's not interested.
Oh, right.
Discord has said it takes immediate action when it encounters violations like underage users, inappropriate content.
Really?
Yeah,
Come
sure,
on.
right.
Underage users is nothing but. All right. Sure.
And it goes on to say Discord disabled 2,182 servers, so those are those little chat rooms, and 25,000 individual accounts for violent extremism in the second half of 2021. Do you think they're having a problem there with that?
I guess so. They're saying, "Oh, we have no problem. Look how much we're shutting down," and other people say, "Look how much there is."
It's ridiculous to say that we have the problem almost completely under control.
We've only stopped 2,000 violent extremists.
There's only millions of them on our servers, and we've gotten rid of most of them.
Yeah, I mean, even if you have in fact gotten rid of most of them, what is it why are there 2,000 violent extremists to be found in any given year?
Right. It sounds like an old Monty Python routine. How dare you talk about cannibalism in the British Army? We've got the problem nearly under control.
All right. Well, kids today, huh?
Yeah,
With their rock and roll and mass murder. Okay. Bad
anyway.
News. Yes. There was something I saw the other day that I think this Buffalo shooter apparently asked in the last couple months of his senior year in high school, as everyone was, as part of a class project. So what are your plans? What you going to do with your life after you graduate? And he answered, I'd like to commit a murder-suicide. And, well, golly. That did garner some mental health intervention. And then he graduated, and you know what happens after that? The school says, oh, not a student anymore. All right, they don't bother telling anybody, like, okay, society, you now have a guy who's graduated and is not our problem anymore, but we asked him, what are you going to do this summer? And he said, commit murder-suicide. Anybody want to look into that? But,
do you remember a fellow named Miles Taylor?
No. Oh, I need to add, by the way, that was on his record when he then went to buy his AR-15, and they said, all right, well, red flag, can't tell whether it's really red or not. Give him the gun. All right. Who are we checking in on? Miles? Who?
Miles Taylor, a former government official in Donald Trump's administration.
Oh, yeah. He thinks he's a good guy now.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So after all of the Republican nut jobs being elected or running or doing fairly well, sometimes winning, in the primaries, he wrote last night, I'm done. I no longer believe the Republican Party can be saved. The vitriolic rhetoric is inspiring violent radicals. We're talking about Buffalo, which is another reason why the Buffalo story is not going away. Yes. I'm quitting the GOP, and I hope more do the same. It's wonderful. I'm glad you're doing that. I'm going to skip the, now you know.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, anybody who does
real
will take it in the next election.
Right.
I think that, again, this is one of the reasons I'm making the case for why the Buffalo story still has resonance and is going to wind up playing out. Here's another. Republicans play on fears of great replacement and bid for base voters. This is from the New York Times. Republicans are furious. People remember they've been pushing the racist great replacement rhetoric for years, says Bess Levin in Vanity Fair. Representative Elise Stefanik has led the charge, blasting media for accurately reporting her racist rhetoric. These are reasons why, because of what happened in Buffalo, people are not letting the Republican Party off the hook. And so between, on the one hand, the insurrectionist stuff, Stop the Steal, and on the other, the great replacement stuff, they're on it. I mean, it all ties to Buffalo. That's what you get for this kind of lying to the public. And yes, it's very much important to tie whoever's in the Republican Party to what happened in Buffalo, because yes, you're responsible. Not as responsible, perhaps, as Tucker Carlson and Fox News, but that's the Republican Party too.
Yep. Well, all true. And yeah, I guess I'm with you. For the moment, certainly people who are having great epiphanies and converting, we just say, all right, we all know what the subtext is here. At the moment, we can allow them to speak because it's useful to everyone. And if they also change their votes, fantastic. If they can convince other people, fantastic. Much too much to do, really, to spend a great deal of time worrying about whether they are worthy converts or not. I guess unless they're running for office and you have to evaluate them on that basis. But otherwise, as an influencer, I suppose, if you want to have some grains of salt nearby, I guess that's easy enough to do. Everybody be on the alert. But yeah, at this point, we might as well just hear them out. It's actually good rhetoric to circulate. So, okay.
So anyway, that's pretty much what I got for today.
Oh, all right. Well, that's a good number of things, actually. Not bad. Let's see.
I suppose I could have made it last an hour by speaking slower, but we don't do that. We speak as quickly as we can.
Right. Well, we have a lot to try and fit in. Okay. Well, I guess I should clarify for the record, too. We do have this comment on the KITM hashtag, Ricky Kanakistani, who tells us, I have Discord, but I've never used it. Twitch, however, I do use. It's not that, of course, anybody who has ever downloaded the app or used it or thought about using it is a mass murderer, I think. I'm pretty sure about that. I mean, my kids
Hey, don't get me
Discord.
started on Twitter.
Yeah, that's right.
Anybody uses Twitter,
They're all crazy. Although it is kind of interesting, and maybe maybe these platforms should feel a little bit of heat. My kids use, Discord for their own gaming, so I know a little bit about. Well, I get some idea of what it looks like, and it's an aesthetic that mostly only kids, I think, could stand. But Twitch, yeah, I don't know much about it, except I do notice that I have one of those newfangled televisions that they sell you now that you can't get just a regular TV. You got to have some major internet companies branding living in it when it comes out of the box. So mine's got the Amazon TV stuff embedded in it. And whenever you turn that on, and they make recommendations about the apps to use, but Twitch is prominently featured as a default item on, it may or may not have something to do with the fact that, it feeds off of the same IP address as my kids and their gaming. So maybe it knows that they're gamers and that's why it's offering Twitch. But I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting to see that up at the top, and that maybe these companies that provide the smart TVs want to think a little bit about what the brand reputation is of some of these channels that they feature. That came up again the other day as I watched via Twitter someone talking about the schedule of events on the various Sirius XM political channels, and noting for the record that they still call the channel that now talks about, supports, and interviews all of the January 6th insurrectionists these days still goes by the name they originally hung on it, Sirius XM Patriot channel, which is enormously offensive, and they really ought to wake up over there at Sirius XM. I know that it was a bad idea when they did it, and they were taken to task on it, and at that time they were saying, by patriot we mean Republican people who run around saying they're patriots. Yes, that was for Tea Partiers and George W. Bush supporters, etc. Bad idea then. Even worse now, in the shadow of the insurrection. And if they wanted to change it to what would they do? What would the listeners do if the management changed it to
channel?
Yeah, or Sirius XM insurrectionists.
And I just, this whole concept goes back to me. For me, goes way back to the American Legion for Nixon Patriots.
Okay. Yeah.
We're pro-Vietnam War, and we're patriots, and we support the beating up of hippies, and we're the right-wing Republican Party, and same as it ever was.
Yeah, I guess so. It's a long history of that, and I guess there's no change on the horizon for that. But I don't know. To anybody who might have influence with Sirius XM, that's actually seriously infuriating. And
so this is from a New York Times article last year that looked at the origins of Discord. And there were some obscure games that you'd never heard of, literally never heard of, and even having just read it, I still haven't heard of it. When Jason Citron invented this, and he said at the time we had like 6 users, and it wasn't clear it was going to work, so we got rid of the game. And then it says at first Discord was popular only with other gamers, but more than 6 years later, driven in part by the pandemic, it's exploded into the mainstream. While adults working from home went to Zoom, their kids were downloading Discord.
Yes, that's largely true. All the discussion of what was going on their Zoom classes was happening on Discord because you didn't want the teacher to see it. You can't use the Zoom chat feature, or she'll see you gabbing during class. She can't see any of your faces because none of you will turn your cameras on. But yeah, that's true. The pandemic probably did wonders for them, got kids to use it. And, that's the way they talk to their friends. I couldn't very well say no to it. But there are a lot of articles out now suggesting that parents should maybe peek over the kid's shoulder once in a while, and you'd be surprised to see what your kids might be being exposed to. So you should be talking to them about that. And I do from time to time and say, hey, you know what to look out for. And people will say it. Sometimes they're joking. Sometimes they're not. But you got to be aware of this. And, sometimes the best thing to do is make no mention of what people you aren't close to are saying. But if people you're close to start saying things like this, let's talk about it. Tell me when we'll figure out what we can do about this. So far so good, but they might just be hiding from me. Who knows? Right.
Speaking of listeners, one of them on Twitter, Infinite Monkey Theorem account, one of my favorites who follows me, says, listen, you mentioned that morning console poll, but you might want to mention the same thing from the poll. The generic ballot is Democrats 44, Republicans 42. That's always nice. For a while, and in some other polls, the Republicans actually are leading on the generic ballot. And the typical thinking is the Democrats need like a 7 or 8 point lead in order to break even, at least in the House, just because of gerrymandering and other things.
Right.
But I'd rather have a lead than not have a lead. It's not over. There's plenty of time. Things can change. Things can change abruptly sometimes. Views of Biden are likely not going to change all that much. It's kind of fixed in people's minds in terms of who he is and who he isn't. What does change is, sometimes I like that. Given what's going on, look at what's happening in Ukraine, and we need somebody like that. And sometimes well, I don't like that. Look what's happening at home in the economy, and he's not moving fast, so it depends.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting mix of things to say, who do you trust more on these important issues? Republicans. And what about on this one? Republicans. And who do you want to win? Democrats. Oh, what? Okay. Well,
because there's other things, it's, you follow this
I don't know how you can
closer than I do.
But...
And, you can ask people how they feel about getting rid of weapons of mass destruction in the hands of Americans. Well, I really, think we need more control. Well, are you going to vote on that? Well, yes, or not exactly. Well, there's other things.
Yeah. Well, there's always that.
I'm a centrist. I want gun control and insurrection.
Right. Kitchen table. I want guns.
I want guns on the table.
Yeah, that's right. No, none of these guns under the table. Han Solo. I'm looking at you. So, yeah.
You can never tell. Voters are complicated people because they're human. Humans are complicated, and you can never quite figure out what they're going to do. And there's, people who make a living explaining to you what they're going to do, and sometimes they're wrong, and they never take responsibility for that, and that's just the way it goes.
Let's do that.
I'm in a better position. I don't know.
We have the freedom to say, actually, I have no idea about that.
I have no idea, and I don't get paid to know. So, the fact that I have no idea. Look, what's going to happen with student loans? I don't know.
Yeah. Right. Whatever. Yeah. We forgot about that lately. But, time to get back to that. But I guess we have to wait for the president to get back from Buffalo and for that to settle down a little bit. It's no time to be talking about it. All right. Also, I don't think there's any activity happening in Congress at the moment. Anyway.
So let me just leave you with this. This is Andrew Seidel on Twitter, an attorney.
Twitter, arrest him.
Yeah, and he's talking about Doug Mastriano.
Oh.
And the reason he says, let's talk about how damn scary it is that a virulent Christian nationalist intimately tied to the January 6th insurrection and the big lie might be Pennsylvania's governor in charge of its elections. I know about Mastriano because of my work exposing the links between Christian nationalism and the January 6th insurrection, which can be found in the huge report on that subject released with brilliant contributions from leading experts, which, by the way, is called Christian Nationalism and the January 6th Insurrection, in case you were having trouble finding it, right? I also covered Mastriano in my testimony to the January 6th Committee, which is not publicly available yet, but he makes it public.
Put it on Discord.
Yeah. And Mastriano believed he was answering God's calling, asking him to run for governor. He believes he's been chosen by his God, like so many of the characters in this book. That belief should scare the hell out of you.
Well,
so, that's his comment on Mastriano.
Seriously, the I don't know what the panoply, the number of Republican candidates. I'm trying to think of one that I thought was even in passing good in some way. Who has casually mentioned that they're pretty sure God called them up on Discord possibly and told them to run for office, and I can't think of very many. It's a splashy sort of thing. It puts you immediately into a certain category. And the good news is that category, they tend to lose, or if they do manage to capture office, hold it for a term and then they're gone. But it may only take one term for these guys to do their damage. So I'd much rather they not get that chance.
Well, it puts you in Michelle Bachmann territory.
Yeah, pretty much. Sarah Palin, Michelle Bachmann, who knows who else. But, okay, so that's where Doug Mastriano sits as well. Okay, good to know. And if the call is coming from Discord, it's probably not God.
Well, unclear.
Yeah, I mean, it's not definitive proof, but it seems to me that, well, who knows? I don't know. Maybe just all of these other methods of communication were just early pre-Discord. It's pretty dramatic, burning bush kind of thing, for instance. Very well remembered. Seems to me like it's a step down, though, to use Discord, but what do I know? Strange and mysterious ways, as they say.
Well, for you fellow kids, it's perhaps a more appealing way of hearing what God thinks than having some radical pastor screaming at you at a Sunday megachurch.
Yes, right. And it does always tend to cost you money. God apparently loves money.
Yeah, it's part of the deal.
Who knew? Okay. Well, that just about covers it, except for everything else in the world.
Yeah, in Ukraine, not much movement. Mariupol is now completely in Russian hands and totally destroyed. They're still not making a whole lot of headway in the Donbass. It's pretty clear they've lost the Battle of Kharkiv, and how far Ukraine goes from this particular point of view in terms of counteroffensive is unclear. But again, lots of they're not where they need to be, and the only thing they're really good at is destroying cities. But they're very good at that.
Okay, well, that's what they practice.
Some estimates are they lost 15%, 1/3 of what they sent to Ukraine, but 15% of their entire force has been killed or wounded. And if that's the case, generally speaking, the estimate is once 10% or more of your unit is lost, you can become somewhat ineffective.
Right.
In terms of the Russian army, they're not scaring anybody anymore.
Okay. I just have this sneaking suspicion that they're all going to come jumping out from behind something and say, "Ha! Fooled you. We told you thought we were all dead." But
what?
Yeah. I don't know. The exploding tanks is kind of hard.
That's what Finland does.
I get. Oh, right. Well, they don't even
hide
jump
and
out
shoot
necessarily.
That's not the way the Russians do it.
Right.
In fact, the whole thing is the Russians really haven't changed their ways of doing things since old Soviet Union.
Yeah, or
and
even
didn't work so
before.
well, and it's not working that well now, and everybody can see it, and so they're stuck with that.
Massive troop movements. That's the usual methodology of enormous countries who have lots and lots of conscripts to choose from, or lots and lots of people to conscript, I guess, and they tend to rely on mass troop movements in overwhelming numbers, even if they don't all have guns when they're sent to the front. So. All right, well, we'll see. Finland and Sweden continue to move forward in their hopes of joining NATO. I understand Turkey is opposing their joining. I'm not certain exactly why that is, but it never feels good when Turkish President Erdogan does anything disruptive, because he's a bit of a weirdo himself. And, I don't know. It doesn't make any difference to him, I'm sure. But not a whole lot of people were wild about Turkey joining either. But they were a strategic addition in the day because they were on the doorstep of Russia and controlled the Bosporus Straits. So it seemed like it made some sense. But I don't know. Also, they have like no frontage on the North Atlantic whatsoever, whereas the Finns and, well, I guess they do through the Baltic. But at any rate, okay, we can't debate that here, but something to watch, and we'll see whether their objection in Turkey makes any difference. It might not. So, all right. Well, it's a good time then to wrap things up. We have another day ahead of us to speak with you, Greg, and things heating up again on the COVID front, slowly but surely, as it turns out. So maybe we'll check in with them being those nasty germs that we're dealing with perhaps a bit tomorrow. Or if, like Ukraine, it turns to stalemate, we can skip it. All right. We'll check in with you again tomorrow then.
Okay, take care.
All right. Done. We made it last. Okay.
Yeah, somehow.
Very good. I had something yesterday that we put aside. Well, we'll discuss it tomorrow, or I'll try and find it again and give you a hint. But I put at least one COVID thing aside that I better not discuss it without somebody who knows what they're talking about here. So.
All right. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Very good. Take care. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue on our own to figure out just what the hell's going on these days. And by the way, on the Discord front, Ricky also notes that if the TV, I'm talking about the super smart, super cool TV that is so smart that it puts Twitch in front of my face all the time, if it's an Amazon Fire TV, and it feels like it is one, I think it actually is, Twitch is part of a Prime account, which I also have, and which is probably why it shows up. She says, our Saturday night show streams on Twitch, so there you go. I've never opened it I've never opened hardly any of the things that they offer. There's about 15,000 different apps, I don't know, available for the thing, and I like the ones that make it work like a regular old TV. So that's generally what I'm using for. But I do notice that Twitch, with its really annoying kid-ish friendly logo, is a jarring exception to what's around it. And you'd think that would make me click on it once or twice, but I'm too busy catching up with my shows to be finding new ones on Twitch or anywhere else. Okay, and what? Oh, also a comment about Turkey. All right, we'll take it, Ricky. Turkey should have been kicked out of NATO when they became a dictatorship. Probably true. Yeah, I mean, again, Turkey was always, I think, a strategic addition more than anything else. Just their geographic placement. They had nothing in common with NATO when they joined, and they still don't. So, whatever. But shouldn't be kicking people out of NATO at the moment necessarily, but yeah, they're kind of odd, and it's a little dicey about how far you want to trust them. And the fact that they are on Russia's doorstep also makes them susceptible to Russian manipulation too. So it's not a great situation. I don't know the rules for joining NATO and the rules for who has a veto over people joining NATO. So I'm not certain how seriously to take it. It got reported. That much I have to take seriously. And I imagine some discussions behind the scenes will either take care of the problem or minimize it such that Finland and Sweden can join, if they still want to. But the sentiment is running hot there, so I guess they ought to take advantage of it. And they certainly fit more squarely into the traditional idea of of countries that would have enough interest in the North Atlantic part of our treaty organization to have a strong interest in joining. And it's quite surprising, really, that they haven't for all this time. But okay. Can't get into the geopolitics of that right now, even if I did understand it. All right. As reported briefly, where there is news that the Department of Justice has requested the January 6th committee transcripts. USA Today reports that as signaling an escalation of the inquiry into January 6th over on the Department of Justice side. Let's see if they can convince us of that. The Justice Department has requested transcripts of interviews conducted by the House Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, but the panel's chairman has initially rejected the request. Report Kevin Johnson and Bart Jansen, reflecting great diversity, I guess, there in the naming, anyway, of the authors of the piece. A Johnson and a Jansen, together at last. The chairman, Representative Benny Thompson of Mississippi, told reporters the request arrived this week, but that lawmakers haven't agreed to provide transcripts because they are in the midst of their own investigation. All right. It's our work product. It's the committee's work product, Thompson said, adding the transcripts could be provided to the department at some point in the future. I mean, the reality is we are conducting our own investigation, Thompson said, and obviously if they want to come and talk, they're perfectly welcome to come and talk, and we have talked to them on other situations, but we can't give them full access to our product. That would be premature at this point because we haven't completed our work. Though it usually works in the opposite direction, like the work that counts in terms of wanting to keep the investigation unbiased for legal reasons. That's usually what happens on the DOJ side. Not as much on the on a committee side, since they're not legal proceedings. But okay, I mean, I hope it doesn't just come down to, well, you're going to cut into our ratings, or fewer people are going to think I'm a hero for discovering this if I reveal what's going on first. I mean, there's some pretty good reason to believe that even if they handed over the transcripts, the Department of Justice wouldn't be doing much to trumpet what's in them at this point, but who knows? I don't deal with the Department of Justice all that often, and they do, so perhaps they're onto something. The New York Times first reported this request on Tuesday. Not that I'm reading their story about it. Just so happens that when I opened up a browser at some point yesterday, one of the suggested stories was about this, and I grabbed it just so I'd have something, and lo and behold, it turned out to be USA Today. The request includes the committee's discussions with associates of former President Donald Trump, signaling that the federal inquiry into the insurrection has accelerated, moving beyond the broad dragnet for the mob that stormed the Capitol in an attempt to block the certification of the 2020 election. Thompson said the Justice Department didn't name the witnesses whose transcripts it sought, but my understanding is it came with no names attached to it or anything, Thompson said. So how would you even know if you wanted to cooperate with them and give them the transcripts? Which ones do you want? That sounds rather odd. Earlier this month, Donald Trump Jr., the eldest son of the former president, offered voluntary testimony before the committee, the latest family member to appear before the panel. Donald Trump Jr.'s appearance follows voluntary meetings involving sister Ivanka Trump and her husband, Jared Kushner, both of whom served as top advisors to the former president. Disclosure of the Justice Department transcript request comes as the committee prepares for its first public hearing next month, following interviews with more than 1,000 witnesses. The Justice inquiry is separate from the committee's investigation, but the panel took the extraordinary step last week of subpoenaing House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, along with 4 other Republican lawmakers and close allies of the former president. Thompson said McCarthy, along with Representatives Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, Jim Jordan of Ohio, Andy Biggs of Arizona, and Mo Brooks of Alabama, were issued subpoenas after failing to voluntarily cooperate with the panel's investigation. The Select Committee has learned that several of our colleagues have information relevant to our investigation into the attack on January 6th and the events leading up to it. Before we hold our hearings next month, we wished to provide members the opportunity to discuss these matters with the committee voluntarily. Regrettably, the individuals receiving subpoenas today have refused and were forced to take this step to help ensure the committee uncovers facts concerning January 6th, says Thompson. McCarthy has been at the center of a recent political firestorm after leaked audio tapes revealed that he believed former President Donald Trump should have resigned in the wake of the attacks. Earlier this year, USA Today reported that federal investigators have been asking suspects in the January 6th Capitol attack, including members of the far-right extremist group Oath Keepers, about possible links between Donald Trump, his inner circle, and the rioters. Federal prosecutors have questioned defendants facing the most serious offenses and those who played cursory roles in the attack about possible connections to the former president and those close to him, as justice has pursued its wide-ranging prosecution. Okay, so you get the idea. They're wrapping up here, but it doesn't tell us too much. Doesn't tell us whose transcripts they requested, and only that requests were made and they might be granted later. But I guess it's really all in the headline, so I'm ready to jump out about that now and just say, all right, it's a signal. It might be a false signal, but it's being taken as a signal that the Justice Department is escalating its inquiry into the attack, and that would be a great thing, and I hope that it happens, and I hope that it happens quickly and effectively. We will see. All right, let's see. Back into Pocket to see what else I put aside the other day. Yes. There's an interesting bit of news. I picked it up from The Hill. We'll see where The Hill picked it up from. But of some interest, pro-Trump electors, it's in quotes, remember the fake electors for Trump from Wisconsin, have been hit with what is described here as a first-of-its-kind lawsuit. Good. This seems like I like the concept of dragging them to, before a judge and creating some legal problems for them. It would be the first accountability of any kind that there's been for any of them. Whether it's got a leg to stand on, I don't know. Let's see. John Krusel is the reporter for The Hill on this, and we'll see whether they're cribbing off of anybody else's reporting if we find the story thin on our way through it. A lawsuit filed by a group of Wisconsin residents on Tuesday takes aim at the Trump backers who claimed to represent the state's valid slate of 2020 presidential electors, despite President Biden's victory there. The first-of-its-kind litigation seeks to hold accountable a dozen named defendants that it accuses of perpetrating a fraudulent scheme to undermine democracy by attempting to bypass the will of Wisconsin voters and to deter similar efforts in the future. This perhaps gives us a chance to talk about the broader case of what's going on in Wisconsin these days with respect to the 2020 election and undoing its results. But this is kind of interesting. I was wondering when or if anything was going to happen with the fake electors. They did, after all, provide a list of their names to Congress and possibly even to the National Archives. So, I mean, a list of suspects was mailed to Washington, D.C. I think we ought to be following up on this at some point, but apparently it takes a lawsuit in Wisconsin to do it. Well, let's continue on. This is not how we do elections in the United States, said Mary McCord, executive director of the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection at Georgetown University. I don't think I know anything about that, but it's a new one on me. Anyway, that's one of the public interest groups backing the lawsuit. You know, Georgetown University in Wisconsin. But okay, they found some willing plaintiffs there. When your candidate loses, you don't get to just go and vote and submit your ballots as though your candidate won. Yes, that's true. I'm glad someone noticed that. The 55-page complaint filed in state court by a group of Wisconsin citizens that includes 2 democratically chosen electors for Biden, that's a good idea, claims the alleged electoral scheme ran afoul of Wisconsin and federal law, even though it was unsuccessful. The plaintiffs are seeking a ruling declaring that the defendants illegally usurped the role of Wisconsin's 10 electors for Biden and undermined voters' legal authority to elect the candidate of their choosing. The defendants in the case comprise 10 allegedly fraudulent pro-Trump electors and 2 attorneys who helped coordinate their efforts. The individuals named in this case schemed to hijack Wisconsin's role in the selecting of the President of the United States and to override the will of the voters. Jeff Mandel, president and lead counsel at Law Forward, another public interest group backing the lawsuit, said in a statement, "We must hold them accountable for their illegal, unprecedented, and profoundly anti-democratic actions. The plan to substitute slates of pro-Trump electors from key battleground states where former President Trump lost fell apart on January 6, 2021, when former Vice President Mike Pence declined to reject Biden's valid electors. The Department of Justice and the House panel probing the January 6th attack have both said they are looking into the circumstances surrounding the bid to put forth Trump electors from states won by Biden." Okay, and no indication here that they're working off of anybody else's reporting, so they might have done it on their own. But they're very often, picking up wire reports or something from one of the major newspapers and giving it their own spin. So I'm sure there has been reporting on it elsewhere. It just hasn't reached my eyes. But this is the first I've heard of anybody filing a lawsuit about it. And we'll see if that makes real sense. Okay, let's see. Other things to take a look at here. I mentioned other things happening in Wisconsin. I got to back into Pocket to find that. But the Wisconsin drama has been particularly dramatic, I think. And from time to time, we've checked in on what Michael Gableman, the former Supreme Court Justice, who's leading the charge, insisting that there was massive voter fraud in Wisconsin and still hasn't stopped, has been in the news quite a bit, like an angry blue jay screaming outside the window. Can you all hear that? It's quite annoying. At any rate, message to you, blue jay, cut it out. Michael Gableman, annoying blue jay in his own right, backs away, it says, from talk of election decertification, Republicans are now saying. This reported, about 5 days ago on the 13th in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, waiting for a chance to break through on the show, and here it is. Former state Supreme Court Justice Michael Gableman urged Wisconsin lawmakers in March to strongly consider rescinding the state's electoral votes for President Joe Biden, an idea that scholars call legally preposterous. On Tuesday, last Tuesday really, not yesterday but a week before, he presented a different view to Republicans who run the assembly while claiming he had not reversed himself. according to those who met with him. Asked if he had heard Gableman say that the legislature could not decertify the 2020 election, Assembly Speaker Robin Vos of Rochester said, "We just talked about it in front of our entire leadership team, where he basically said that." Assembly Majority Leader Jim Steinke, is that right? You'll have to tell me, Wisconsinites, of, oh boy, Kaukauna? No idea how you would pronounce that one. Let's see. How would a Wisconsinite approach that? I guess so, right? Kaukauna? I guess it's Kaukauna. So it sounds like what's going on outside. The Blue Jays are screaming Kaukauna over and over. Anyway, Majority Leader Jim Steinke, and I guess we're getting that pronunciation about right, possibly, concurred with Voss's account. Oh, yes, by the way, before I forget, I did receive a note on pronunciation from the other day, our correspondent, who hasn't authorized that we divulge his name, but we'll say Roger, so that everybody knows that it's, Roger knows that he's Roger, and whether or not he wants us to, give out any more information, I don't know. But the information he wanted to share with us was on the pronunciation of that county in Idaho where all the shenanigans are going on, and there are shenanigans going on everywhere. But I think yesterday we were guessing that it might be Kootenai County, but it's in fact Kootenai. I don't know why N-A-I gets pronounced knee, but that's just one of those things. And they kind of swallow that syllable in the middle, so it's kind of like Kootenai. There's a little hitch to it, like Kootenai, but they swallow that. So like cute knee that you have there. I can see your knee. It's very cute, but get rid of that Y sound. Coot. Like, you old coot, how's your knee? Coot knee, right? Okay. I think that's where we wanted to be pronunciation-wise. We'll see if I can remember it. I'm just getting around to remembering that the lieutenant governor's last name is pronounced McGeehan, and we may be done with her politically, but who knows? She'll probably come crawling back at some point, and our pronunciation lessons will serve us well. So where were we? Oh, yes, over in Wisconsin, where we didn't know how to pronounce the hometown of the Assembly Majority Leader. That doesn't matter a great deal. What does matter is that Assembly Republicans hired Gableman at taxpayer expense last summer to look into Biden's victory over Donald Trump. Recounts and court rulings have confirmed Biden's win, and independent reviews have found no signs of significant fraud, but Gableman has argued the election was flawed. In March, Gableman drew national attention when he presented a report to the Assembly Elections Committee and declared, "I believe the legislature ought to take a very hard look at the option of decertification." Even that's kind of weasel words, but it has some bold phrasing in there, but all he's saying is what I believe, that the legislature ought to take a hard look at the option of decertification. So that leaves plenty of wiggle room for him there. He argued there were, quote, significant grounds for doing so, even as Voss, Steinke, and experts on the left and right said the notion was legally impossible. In his report, Gableman wrote that it is clear that the Wisconsin legislature could lawfully take steps to decertify electors in any presidential election. Elections that are deemed to have violated state laws are both void and voidable, he wrote. Well, maybe. But at any rate, nonpartisan lawyers for the legislature had previously determined elections can't be decertified. Gableman called their logic defective in his report. And that's all you got to do, I guess. Just call it defective, and then therefore, poof, it is. Decertifying the election would require a majority vote in the Assembly and the state Senate, but would not need the approval of Democratic Governor Tony Evers, Gableman argues. However, this action would not, on its own, have any other legal consequence under state or federal law, Gableman wrote. It would not, for example, change who the current president is. He did not say in his report whether he believed having other states take the same step could result in unseating Biden. So, I mean, that could be just a cop-out where he's saying even if he continues to say he believes in decertification. If Wisconsin somehow were able to decertify its election, that wouldn't change enough electoral votes to make Trump the winner instead of Biden. So it's unclear whether he's saying, well, it won't change the outcome because, is he saying it wouldn't change the outcome because Wisconsin doesn't have enough electoral votes by itself to change the outcome? Or is he saying that, yes, states can vote? This is a possibility too, right? A state legislature, no one can stop them from taking a vote purporting to decertify their state's electors. The only question is whether any authority that matters would recognize their action as having any meaning or require anything of them. So it's unclear whether Gableman is saying, well, if a bunch of states did it and that then the number of their electoral votes was enough that had they been tallied on election night the way we purport to tally them now, then Trump would have been declared the winner, and so therefore it is likely that the Congress will likewise take some action, and then that President Biden will opt to recognize that action and allow himself to be replaced. That's an open question, I guess. Oh, I forgot to turn down the volume of the phone, so that's going to annoy us in the background today. Anyway, so he doesn't answer the question whether it's just entirely possible that he abandons the whole thing by saying, no, we don't recognize that Biden won, but the Electoral College doesn't have to listen to us, and neither does the National Archives or Congress or anybody else for that matter. We can just decertify and have nothing happen. That is a possibility, and that's, I guess, what would happen. I mean, I'm sure that MAGA troops like to think of it as, well, if they voted to decertify, the next logical thing that would happen is that something, and then poof, and Donald Trump moves back. But there's an awful lot of things to do in between saying, well, I say we decertify. Like, does anybody agree that you decertified? Is that a thing that you can do? Does the National Archives accept your document? Does Congress say we should recount? There's a lot of steps left. But, in the world where you're listening to the My Pillow guy, you probably don't think things all the way through. But right now, all it does is give Gableman wiggle room to say, no, my investigation was legit. I just don't know what's going to happen from it. And therefore, if it all falls apart, don't look at me. It's all the other parts that didn't work right. All right, so let's see. Where were we with this? In his meeting Tuesday with Republican Assembly leaders, Gableman maintained that he has held the same stance over the last 2.5 months, according to Voss and Steinke. I think what he's saying is that he's been consistent all along in saying decertification would not result in the desired outcome of many of the people on the far right. Steinke said, my understanding of his position is you could do it, but it wouldn't have any practical effect. Voss said he didn't believe Gableman would again make the case for decertification and tried to contend Gableman has never backed the idea. I think if you go back and ask him, he said you can't decertify. So interesting that I don't know whether these guys genuinely disagree about what they think Gableman was saying or whether they're just, I don't know, faking their way into different positions for one reason or another. But it sounds like Steinke says you can decertify, but it won't have any practical effect. And Voss says that Gableman says, no, Gableman is saying decertification is not a thing you can do. But I guess it depends on what the word you means. It's not a thing that Wisconsin can do with its own votes, or it's not a thing that the United States can do with Wisconsin's vote changing and a couple of other states as well. I don't know. Anyway, he says, I think if you go back and ask him, he said You can't decertify, Voss said, even though Gableman called on lawmakers to consider doing so, and his report included a 6-page appendix explaining how he believed they could do it. That's an odd position to take then, right? He just said, it's a question that hasn't been tested, Voss argued, but neither has me jumping out the window and landing on 2 feet, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that are untested that also can just never happen. Gableman gave a copy of his report to Voss before he released it publicly, but the version he gave Voss didn't include the section on decertification. How interesting. Voss said he was frustrated by that part of Gableman's report, and I can understand why that might be. All right, we're about 4 seconds late on the cue here, so we'll cut out at a different place. Just warning you. I'll continue on and read a little bit more about this. I think that including that, that is to say the part about decertification instructions, took away from the overall message, which was that there were major problems in the 2020 election, Voss said, still sticking to that, I see. Well, he's an oddball. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just a little bit behind in getting back in. Took a short break to go turn down the volume on the phone, you'll be glad to know. So you can't ruin the show now by calling my home phone if you actually know it. I never answer anyway, so it doesn't matter. So anyway, I mean, I think we've gotten to the meat of what's in this article here and almost to the end, so we might as well read it through and then make one more attempt at making sure that we have it right and we understand things correctly here. But still left in the story, Gableman declined to answer questions about his views on decertification. Okay, except, not okay, because the whole point of the report was decertification, so why aren't you answering questions about your views on it? But he doesn't know what to think. He doesn't know how far to go without looking stupid, I think, is what's on his mind. After a Journal Sentinel reporter emailed him questions, Gableman sent a response Wednesday night saying he had blocked the reporter's email address to prevent future communications. Voss described Gableman's most recent comments on decertification after the two signed a new contract that will allow Gableman to receive $5,500 a month from taxpayers while he works on lawsuits related to the election review. The review itself is paused for now, according to Voss, so then why give him $5,500 a month? Democratic State Representative Lisa Subeck of Madison called the review a waste of taxpayer money that should never have been initiated. She said Voss's pause of the review does not go far enough. Far enough would be, let's get rid of the $5,500 a month. As long as he's keeping Gableman on the payroll, this is an ongoing thing, she said. It has not been closed. It's a farce to begin with, and continuing the farce does nothing to build confidence in our elections. 2 weeks ago, when Gableman's future working for the Assembly was unclear, Gableman appeared at a rally at the state capitol with Voss's primary opponent, Adam Steen. That seems like a bad way to keep your contract running. And yet it's happening. Talk about no accountability. Gableman took the stage just after Steen called Voss a treasonous traitor. That's the kind of traitor you would have to be, of course, a treasonous one. Gableman was slated to again appear with Steen at an event Wednesday in Union Grove. He canceled hours after he and Voss reached a new contract. How odd. What an interesting negotiating tactic that is. All Although I guess you'd have to say, on the other hand, I don't know. Do you get good marks for Republicans for not firing him, even though he's an outspoken critic of the person signing the contract with him? Like, that's a lot of freedom of speech. So I guess there's that. Something for them to point to. Anyway, I don't know whether this made things clearer or not, but it occurred to me during the break that, well, it's difficult to do on radio and difficult to do just verbally, but maybe a flow chart would be a great way of illustrating what the differences are in the interpretations of what Gableman is saying. I mean, he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth for sure. If he encounters enough Republicans in Wisconsin who believe the most radical available theory, then he will say, yes, you can decertify, and yes, you should decertify. And he'll give them an argument that allows them to think that they should go ahead. If they are playing things more cautiously and trying to shy away from the stupid and untested and baseless decertification theory, then he'll give them weasel words to believe that that's what he's recommending, if that's what they want to do. So I guess like a flow chart would say, okay, your first decision part here, should we go ahead or with the decertification? The question is, will Wisconsin's decertification, I guess it breaks, maybe the flow chart isn't the greatest idea, because how am I going to even describe the flow chart? But the question, I guess, hinges on this. Will Wisconsin's vote, will a vote by the Wisconsin legislature to decertify their electors contribute in any way if there were other states out there willing to do the same to removing Joe Biden from office? That's the crux of the question. One school of thought says Wisconsin's 10 electors by itself are not going to be able to do that. But if in combination with 50 or whatever number of electors around the country, we were to decertify and other states were to do the same, then that would result in Biden's removal. Now, there's also a school of thought that says this can be effective, and if 50 electoral votes around the country were changed, then it might become possible that some other actions would be taken that would result in the removal from office of Joe Biden and replacing him with Donald Trump. And then there's the school of thought that doesn't even get to that decision point and says no matter what Wisconsin does, and even if 100 other electoral votes around the country purport to change, there is nothing that can happen because there's no mechanism for counting electoral votes again. And here you're just back in the constitutional twilight zone, because let's say 50 to 100 electoral votes worth of states. You know what I'm talking about? So like, I don't know, so 5-6 states, whatever, put together a package of 50 or so electoral votes that they are purporting to change. All they've done at the end of the day is held a vote of the state legislature that purports to change out the electors recognized by the state with those who would have been Trump electors on December 14th, 2020, had, in their view, things gone right that day. But the Electoral Count Act and the Constitution also kind of make clear that there is no second bite at the apple. It doesn't say, though, it doesn't say explicitly that you can never try this again. This is where the twilight zone exists, right? If the law says on December 14th, all of the members of the Electoral College will meet at their respective meeting places in their state capitals and cast their votes, you'd say, if you were one of these people who believe in this thing, show me in this document, this statute or the Constitution, where it says you can't meet again on December 15th and say the opposite. Well, it doesn't say that because it's meant to be definitive. On December, what day will the Electoral College meet? December 14th. anything that meets on December 15th is presumptively not the Electoral College. Unless, I suppose, like what would happen if there was some national emergency, a natural disaster that made it impossible for whatever reason for the Electoral College to meet on the 14th, and it was then universally agreed, let's say, for the sake of argument, that they would meet on the 15th. You couldn't just start out by saying presumptively that this thing that's happening is not the Electoral College, because it says right here that the 14th would be the date. Although they'd probably want to pass some resolution saying that as a finding of the state legislature that it was impossible to meet on the 14th, they therefore delayed until the 15th, and that it should be deemed as having the same effect as such a vote had it been taken on the 14th. But they'd probably want to build some protections into whatever enabling resolutions the states adopted to allow the voting to go ahead on the 15th. But at any rate, I mean, you see, I'm only complicating the matters here. But essentially, all it says, this is terrible. All I'm saying here is that the result of a Wisconsin state legislature vote on decertifying the results of the 2020 election in Wisconsin, ultimately, all that comes out of it is a piece of paper purporting to undo the assignment of the representatives of Wisconsin's, like their commissions, to the Electoral College and to substitute new people. It doesn't by itself reconvene the Electoral College. It doesn't by itself compel anyone to count the Electoral College votes differently, right? Just as they might say, well, show me in the Constitution where you can't do this, the other side may say, well, show me in the Constitution where it says I have to reconvene and reopen the books to accommodate Wisconsin changing its mind. And their only answer to that is, well, of course you would, because logic. After all, your job is to count the electoral votes, not judge their quality and whether or not they are fit to be included. Although, as it happens, the entity that is charged with counting the electoral votes actually is granted that power. Now the question is, should they reopen it and revisit it, or can they say, we were granted that power, we exercised it, and the case is closed? That's where it all breaks down. Nobody knows because nobody's ever done it before. Nobody's ever done it before because nobody's ever had any questions about what it means to count electoral votes before. But if you just stand there with your arms crossed and say, no, those things you counted aren't electoral votes, these are, and you just, you're Republican and you insist that that's the way it is, what does it actually mean? And really all it means is that a bunch of people in Wisconsin have said a thing, and that's it. They've written it down on paper, and it's lying around in Madison, Wisconsin, and if anybody wants to read it, pay attention to it, and act on it, well, that's something else. And if they do act on it, will that mean anything? Well, it's a matter of whether or not other people agree that that act, based on the act of the Wisconsin state legislature, if the Congress were to reconvene in 2023, let's say under a Republican majority, and they got together and they said, it's our finding that the work done by the previous Congress on January 6, 2021 was erroneous or incomplete or faulty in some way. And we find that the new electoral total is this different number that gives or would purport to give Donald Trump the win. Even that act, if it's done in January or any point in the next Congress, beginning in 2023, what happens? I mean, at best, it's a resolution or a joint resolution of the House and Senate, at best, really meaning at worst, of course. But at best, from the Republican point of view, all it says is, we purport to count the electoral votes from 2 years ago differently. And then what? I mean, if it's meant to be legislation of some kind, and we hereby legislate that the new president is Donald Trump and Joe Biden's out, and then they send that legislation to the White House for signature, guess what happens? It gets vetoed. And, unless something crazy happens and everybody, or the election is just stolen overwhelmingly, you basically, how do you get to a Republican majority in both houses large enough to override a veto of something like that if they try to do it by legislation? I don't think that they would. I think they'd do it by resolution, but a resolution has no force of law by itself. That's one of the general problems with it. So now they've adopted basically a sense of the Congress resolution that says, we Republicans, now in the majority in both houses of Congress, feel that Joe Biden shouldn't be the president. But what does that do by itself? Again, it's just a piece of paper. If there's no generalized agreement out there that what this means is that the National Archives should go back and erase the totals that it has from January 3rd, 2021, and replace them with the totals we've handed them now in January or February or whenever they get around to it of 2023, then what happens if the guy at the National Archives says, I'm not picking up my pencil. I'm not doing that. I don't consider myself to be adequately directed by a resolution of Congress that has no force of law. Bring me a statutory demand or a court order, perhaps, and we'll see what we can do. So that might change their minds. They might say, all right, well, we'll go get a court order. And you might say, well, what court would order that? And the answer is nobody. But ultimately, you win on appeal 6-3 in the Supreme Court. So let's try that. And then it's a question of, where does the National Archivist stand? I don't know. Who does it even go to? The National Archivist may say, I don't take my orders from the Supreme Court. The statutory direction is very clear. I'm not going to change the totals. It is now it's now 2024. And we're probably about to start, we're going to start our election soon enough. But now, whatever. It's dragged out. But all I have here is now I've got a court order saying reverse the numbers. Unless the marshal of the Supreme Court marches in here and forces me to change them at gunpoint, I'm just not going to do it. My instructions come from the Electoral Count Act. And it doesn't say that you can change the numbers at any point, much less 2 years down the road. You see what I'm saying here? So even if the Wisconsin state legislature does act and says that they rescind their vote, it doesn't necessarily mean that anybody else has to do anything but look at the paper and say, that's interesting. I think they're very stupid. It doesn't compel any action. And even if you got to the point where there was a court order, you could find somebody who says, gosh, I still respect the courts. I'm going to do it. That's one outcome that's possible. But another outcome that's possible is, I see that you've said it. I'm just not going to move that pencil. It's sitting there. I'm not picking it up. You're not allowed to pick it up, and you're not allowed to pick it up. You're not allowed to pick it up. That's my pen, pencil, what have you, and I'm not moving to do it. You could try. You could issue a writ of mandamus, whatever, but if somebody decides I'm going to go to jail, you still can't make me sign the thing. It kind of hits a brick wall. So there's about 5 different places where this thing jumps off the rails and goes into territory of, well, what if somebody just says, I'm not going to do it? Or says, I am going to do it, and I'm going to make the next person do it. But kind of everybody has to agree here, right? The Wisconsin legislature would have to change things. Other states would have to change things. The Congress would have to say, we acknowledge that these states have done this, and so therefore, as a result, we're going to make our own change on paper. And then they hand it to somebody, and then, like Joe Biden isn't going to say, well, wow, look at this paper. I guess I better go. I mean, he might. He's a Democrat. There's that possibility. But supposing he says, you've done it by legislation, I veto it. Or it's a resolution, it has no force of law. And, they go to court in the Supreme Court. So would be an interesting question for you. Suppose the Supreme Court, through all its dumbassery, comes back and says, yeah, fine, 6-3, we say, or 5-4, John Roberts just can't stomach it. And they say, yeah, these documents from the state legislature and from Congress that purport to change the electoral count, that means the electoral count has changed. It doesn't matter what the National Archives does. They're supposed to record things correctly, and correctly is defined by Congress. And even though this is a Congress away from the Congress that was supposed to have the authority to do these counts, something, poof, Supreme Court, SCOTUS magic, and it's valid, and you have to leave. And the president says, I'm not gonna. Then what? I don't know. There's no accounting for that. Up to this point, it has been assumed that if the president says, to hell with you, I'm not listening to the Supreme Court, that ultimately the Supreme Court has to sit there and stew. But I guess, what if you have the 3% militia armed and ready to say, in defense of the Supreme Court, we're going to assault the White House and shoot it out with the Secret Service? Well, then you just have an insurrection on your hands, and it's civil war, and who cares what the Supreme Court or the president says, for that matter? There's no law, there's no country. So you can see why, given that it could land there, Gableman, a Supreme Court justice at one point in time back in Wisconsin, and these other politicians might say, well, we're not anybody in particular if there's no law and there's no country. So maybe we don't want to push this. So is there a way out from this? Oh, yeah, right. There's the way of saying, you can't do this, and I understood Gableman to say that we couldn't do it, and there would be no effect of doing it anyway, so let's not do it. Therefore, we're not crazy, and we can dismiss the whole thing and go back to normal later on. Wow. That's actually quite complicated. But I guess we've kind of maybe sort of almost straightened it out. Hope so. Hope it makes some sense to you at this point. All right, let's see. Other things to share with you that might be of some interest. Is there anything we haven't at least made mention of? We haven't read deeply into some of these things that we assigned as extra reading the other day. Let's see. I have a couple of tweets from Empty Wheel to refer to. Yeah, since we're talking about legal proceedings that are weird and unfounded, her tweet yesterday responding to a Ron Filipkowski tweet noting that Michael Flynn talks about his notice of intent to sue, which isn't a thing, by the way, seeking $50 million for malicious prosecution. Ron Filipkowski quotes Flynn from this fake news thingy from, which one is this one? I don't know. I never heard of it, and it doesn't matter. But, something mocked up on a template to make it look like news with two little boxes, including an anchor who looks like Ivanka Trump nodding and saying, yeah, in front of a picture of the White House or something in the background. And then Mike Flynn in the other Zoom box in front of a bunch of books in his house or wherever he's broadcasting from, saying various stupid things with one earbud in his ear. That's supposed to be what passes for looking like news these days. If I squint and get down close, maybe I can see which channel is doing this stuff. Oh, worse thing I've ever seen. Lindell TV. I mean, we noted the fact that existed a couple of days ago in one of the stories we read. Anyway, so on Lindell TV, somebody gets paid to sit there and nod while Mike Flynn gesticulates at the camera. And what a job that is. Can you imagine getting paid for that? I mean, it would be stomach churning to have to listen to him. But if you believed in it, I guess it would be fun. Like, no work involved. You just sit there and say, yeah. Well, anyway, he's letting everybody know that he has something that I don't know whether he claimed to have filed a thing, but he's styling something as a, quote, notice of intent to sue, which you either sue or you don't. Otherwise, it's a press conference saying, I'm going to sue that guy. But he says he's going to seek $50 million for malicious prosecution. I'm going to sue these people. We are going to go after these people, all of these people from Jim Comey to President Obama. And Empty Wheel, of course, having to, forced really by ridiculous circumstances to comment. This fake Mike Flynn lawsuit gets better. He's going to sue the people who didn't prosecute him for prosecuting him. Remember that there were a number of charges that were just dropped. He didn't get prosecuted on most of them, and then he got a pardon anyway. So that's pretty interesting, and just as a joke to round things out, she says, "Can I also interest you in fake Venezuelan votes?" All right. Well, okay, that's, I guess, a thing. It hasn't really broken into the mainstream news yet, but just as well as the notice of intent to sue isn't a thing, and the thing that he's saying he's going to sue over also didn't happen. So there's a lot of fakery going on and all this, which I guess explains how there's somebody who's getting paid to nod about it. Doesn't matter. Just part of the tradition of fakery here on Lindell TV. There was other material from Empty Wheel just the other day, too, that was of interest and parked here in Pocket. Commenting on the Josh Dawsey Washington Post piece from yesterday. Inside the January 6th committee, key questions remain as hearings loom. This a piece published yesterday by Jacqueline Alemany. Does she pronounce it with that many syllables? Alemany and Josh Dawsey, both together. And Empty Wheel pulls out one particular quote that the screen grab of which sets up this way. In an interview with the Post, Trump said he was being told by lawmakers and others with knowledge of the committee that Liz Cheney, was the most aggressive member of the panel. From what people tell me, I guess Trump voice here, from what people tell me, from what I hear from other congressmen, she's like a crazed lunatic. She's worse than anyone else, he said. From what I've heard, she's worse than any Democrat. The former president said he viewed Cheney as a bigger opponent than even Representative Adam Schiff of California, who served as the lead House manager in the first impeachment trial of Trump. He declined to say whether he would appear before the committee or answer any questions, but repeatedly claimed he had asked for the military to be ready in advance of the deadly attack on the Capitol. That's the highlighted bit of this screen grab, and it is X'd out, the big red X, because Empty Wheel doesn't want her screen grab circulated to stand for the proposition that that was actually good and valid reporting. Especially that last bit here. She comments, I see Josh Dawsey has dutifully repeated Trump's lies and attacks with no pushback again. I think we're talking about kind of uncritically, even though I'm sure Dawsey and his co-author here, Alemany, probably both think that they're hedging properly by saying, well, we did say he repeatedly claimed that he had asked for the military, blah, 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 blah. But they neglected to say he says so without basis or it is a lie. And they just print it as, well, you'll have to determine for yourself whether he's lying about this. But remember, this is the thing that he invented just the other day. The story being, I wanted to protect the Capitol on January 6th by bringing the military in. And I asked repeatedly about guarding the Capitol with the military because I knew that there could be violence because I'm guilty of having stoked that violence. It would have to be your conclusion, but he doesn't speak about that part. But of course, no, there was no effort to mobilize the military to protect the Capitol. And to the extent that he had even given it some thought, it was almost assuredly more likely that he was hoping the military would be there in support of his attack on the Capitol. But a good point being made here by Marcy. And then a small bit extra to the thread that Dawsey has performed another of what he calls an interview with Trump. That's in quotes. An interview with Trump likely means we have more BS coming. Remember to bring your rain jacket, I guess. Imagine dreaming of going into journalism so you could one day fawningly quote a grown man accuse a professional woman of being a crazed lunatic. I guess that's a good point, too. On top of it also, still giving Trump too much credit, and why they just don't refer to him as I keep encouraging them to do the Orange Vermin Supreme? I do not know. But the decision was long ago made that they were going to treat him as a legitimate political actor, and it's never changed. All right, let's see. I think we really have to wrap things up. The music says so anyway. We're back tomorrow with Greg, and Friday for a cleaning out of what remains in pocket, although I have a feeling that people are going to fill it up over the next couple of days, no doubt. Justice Putnam comes up next here on Netroots Radio with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I was going to say he comes up next here on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but that's not what this is. This gives us an opportunity, however, to tell you what's coming up. We usually squander this opportunity with other stuff. What's up next? Let's see, the January 6th transcripts being asked for, right? Maybe the savvy way to investigate the insurrection for the Justice Department. On the rest of his menu for the day, the Biden administration announced a plan to increase the supply of affordable housing, and Pennsylvania could benefit the most. Wake up, Pennsylvania. You're in the news. 3 Wisconsin Democratic voters filed a first-of-its-kind lawsuit against the 10 fake Trump electors. We were just there on that story. And the Justice Department sued Republican mega-donor Steve Wynn to register as an agent of China. The first affirmative civil lawsuit under the Foreign Agents Registration Act in more than 30 years. Wow.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Who knew it would be about Steve Wynn? Internationally, the UN Special Envoy for Iraq warned that the streets are about to boil over, and the Spanish government approved a draft bill that widens abortion rights while making Spain the first country in Europe entitling workers to paid menstrual leave. Wow. Stay tuned for that one next.